Dan.
So my name is Catalina Eugenia Matei.
It's not hard to find work. It's hard to find a job.
It's harder to plan your life because you don't know if you're gonna have money in the future.
I can find some other people and I can pay less to them and they can work with me. So why do I need you? It's not only in Europe, it's not only in Russia, it's not only in Turkey, it's everywhere.
So my name is Catalina Eugenia Matei, and I'm from Romania. I studied in the University of Architecture and Urbanism, Ion Mincu, in Bucharest. And then, like during my studies there, in the third year, I started working. It was very easy to find a job. This happened around 2006. And at that time in Romania, there was a boom in building because a lot of money was going into, because people were saying the money going into the lands was going up, so also the building prices were going up, so everybody wanted to build because they thought they were going to get a lot of money for the buildings. So once they started to do that, they needed a lot of architects. There weren't enough, so they were also accepting students. So it was really easy for me to find a job. And after I finished, the economic crash came in 2010, and you couldn't find much. Nobody was building, nobody was doing anything, it was stopped. Most of my friends didn't have a job. The ones who had were working long hours, and they were just paid for the normal hours. So it was because they knew there were a lot of people on the market that would want that job. Their bosses would think, well, you have to work really hard just to keep this job.
I'm Mert, and I am 24 years old. I studied English language. There is always job in Turkey, let's say. There is always job. You can always find a job. But you cannot find any job which has good quality. You can work a lot. Maybe your boss can earn a lot of money, but you are just serving that person, And it's not a life. You are just wasting your life. You try to survive, you just work, you just go to work, you don't have any social life.
I'm Dragan Ilic. I finished my studies in 2010. I graduated veterinary medicine, bachelor's degree. I have a bachelor's degree now, and pretty much I have been unemployed since. I did some internship between 2010 and now, and I had some short-term employment, but that's it basically. My internship, I did it in food safety agency, which is government agency. It was really a proper internship, and I learned a lot. We cooperated with European Food Safety Authority, with World Health Organization, and some UN organizations and so on. And nothing after that, nothing. Yeah. The paper I received in the end, the knowledge I got at the end of the internship, it's worth nothing. I did try to find a job every day. I was applying, but the employers just wouldn't reply to my emails, because at the time when you finish your studies, you don't have any experience, and every employer wants a worker with experience. And in the first year or 2 years, I had maybe 1 or 2 interviews.
And also my job is a bit special because I'm supposed to be a cartoonist, and I am a cartoonist, just that I don't live out of it yet. And it's a job where it's not really, like a traditional job, like you try to enter in a company and be employed. you can be your own boss with this job. And so you have to get published, for example, or you have to find people that want to put your illustrations in some magazine or books, or so it's a little bit different. It's a bit more by contacts, like if you know someone that knows someone, something like this, and you have to be already in the network, let's say.
My name is Dan, and I come from Ljubljana originally, but I work here in Škofja Loka. Actually, I don't really work. I live here and I help with the organization that deals with youth. So I help sometimes with administration, sometimes with other work, and I'm also I'm an editor of student magazine. I am formally not a student anymore, even though I still have to finish my faculty, but formally I lost my student status. So it means that now I am unemployed and I am registered on this government agency that looks a job for you. So this is the problem that most young people face when they finish a faculty in Slovenia, especially if it's social sciences or humanistic faculty. So the situation is like this in Slovenia, that there's not a lot of openings for young people to work. For example, I am studying sociology, philosophy, pedagogic course, which means I can be a professor. Right now, the practice is that you have to have 1 year of apprenticeship at a high school, for example, which is not paid. So it's a problem, you know. How can... Yeah, it's a problem.
I have some friends, they worked in the same company for a long time, but every month they were having this new 1 month contract. Because it's just too hard for employers to bet that, okay, now we are going to employ you and that's it, it's gonna be good, you know.
I can talk about one of my friends maybe. Okay, he lives in Istanbul, yeah, and he can speak English, French, also maybe some other language, but I'm not sure about it. And you know, he studied in one of the best universities in Turkey. Then he went abroad for 1 year, so he has some abroad experience. So he's, let's say, pretty qualified to find a job. But he couldn't do it in maybe last 6 or 7 months. And when he goes to some interviews, those companies say to him that, okay, if you want to work with us, okay, we can pay you like 400 euros. But you live in Istanbul, and that money is nothing. So how can you survive if you work in that company and if you get paid like 400 euros? It's nothing. So now he's desperate. He doesn't know what to do. And you know, he's also getting some pressure from his family because he studied, he learned some languages, and now society is waiting for something from him. But he cannot do anything. It's not his fault. I think it's society's fault. Also, it's government's fault. Or all these systems' faults, you know.
You had one student, he was studying engineering. So one firm that needed this kind of a workforce employed him through the student work. When he graduated, they didn't took him in for a long-term contract. They took another student. So this is what they were doing, because having students in your workforce is cheaper. You have to pay less to the state. You are not bound by this long-term contract, and it was easier for them to do this. Student agencies that provide work, they have their portals on internet. There are a couple of them, and companies, they put announcements on these agencies. So when you're a student, you can access this available work, and then you call the employee and you talk with them, and then they take you. It's usually a work for, let's say, half a year, a couple of months. Well, this is the original idea, but at the end, people would work years in a bar and at a warehouse, and they would actually practically work as much as people that have these long-term contracts. And I know a lot of people that worked for 10 years through this scheme, through this student work. But in these 10 years, they don't have their work period acknowledged. They didn't do anything for their pension. And yeah, so in a way, it's a bit of exploitation.
It's hard because I see it around me and I see my friends and how much they work, and sometimes it's not even enough money, you know. I mean, my problem is this, because if they would work so hard and they would have money to have a decent life, I wouldn't have such a big issue with it. But they can't even have a decent life. They have a decent life because their parents help or their family help. And that's sort of normal in Romania. You know, it's happening more and more now. Students in university can go to university because their parents help them. Their parents in pension can live a decent life just because their children are helping them. So you always need sort of another help to have a decent life. You can't sort of have it by yourself.
More and more, I think young people are going to live back to their parents. It was really not like this before. Like in Slovenia or in Italy, young people stay until they're 30 or even more at their parents'
it's cheaper.
place. Yeah, because it's cheaper. But it used to be not like this in France. When I was a teenager, it was sure for me that when I'm 18, I'm gonna go out, you know, of my family, and everybody would think this way. But now, I think some people, they have to come back to their parents because, okay, they are maybe 30 or something, but they can't live by themselves. It's too expensive. Because if you get this job that is unsafe and everything, it's really hard to have a flat of yourself.
What we have in the job market is this tendency of, let's say, peripheral states of European Union. They have to raise who will make a better environment for business, for big capital. And in this climate, we are lowering, wages. We are trying to lower the cost of work to attract, investments and capital and, businessmen and so-called job creators. And this is the problem because of this, traditional forms of work relations, like long-term contracts that were safe, that enabled a worker to plan his future, to make a family, to take a credit to build a house, to buy a flat. Nowadays, you have a lot of so-called precariat work relationships, which are student work, which are honorary, which are, in Slovenia they're called SP. It means that you open your own company so you can provide services to your employer. And all this puts the pressure on the worker. And we are losing these traditional long-term contracts between worker and employee. And it makes us carrying heavier and heavier burden with this.
Most employers have that kind of deal with employees. The employees sign a contract for 1 year, but what they do, they fire that person, for example, a week before the end of that 1 year. Because if you work for 1 whole year, after that employer has to give you a permanent job. That's by law. So if they fire you 1 week before the end of your contract, he's not obligated to offer you, permanent job. And he can also employ you again after 1 week, 2 weeks, for next 1 year.
My generation, at least, we were really pushed into longer studies, but actually people that pushed us in this direction were from a generation where it was relevant, because really you would get a higher job, a higher situation, but in my generation it was a bit, useless, because then you would graduate, but there would be no job for you, or really unstable jobs, like maybe you would be employed for 1 month and then not employed, and then employed for 2 months. So yeah, it was like this. It's still like this.
You know, when you meet somebody, like some old friend, they're asking you, what are you doing now? Where are you working? And if you say no, you know, you feel like you're less than you're supposed to be. And that's not supposed to happen. Like, it's not necessarily your fault that you don't have a job.
I would like to have a job, you know, in a company that is, let's say, at least partially run by workers, and that it has this, we are not only making profit, we are also making some social achievements. We are making our local environment better. So the profit is not only in euros, the profit is also in kindergartens, and the profit is also in the river that is not polluted. There is also a profit here. The profit is also in, for example, vegetables that are, you know, locally grown and not imported. You know, there are some profits that are not yet maybe included in some economic models, but they do exist, because right now profits can make some minuses that the society has to cover, right? So workers' health would be covered by the health system that is public. Pollution would be covered by, you know, the whole society. So these are some extremities, I think they're called, that are socialized, while all the profits are being privatized. So in a company where it's cooperative, it's locally run, they know these things. They don't want to pollute their own river because they live in that river. Their children, you know, swim in that river, and so on. So in the future, if I have some regular job, I would like to be in this kind of environment.
From the view of entire economics, precarious work is not a problem of one worker, but a disease of the entire circular economic system in which every individual has a place. If you hurt one group of people in this circle, it will have a great influence on everyone in it. Government, society, all should be aware of this problem and solve it in order to save the economic system. The expansion of the precarious work presents us a social collapse of the modern economic system. The consequences of the wounds we carry today, it will certainly be revealed in the future.